taking three.
Going for the St. Louis now.
Oh no!
Son of a bitch.
You get your two?
Yeah. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thotgor here, of course. And today we're going to take a look at another episode of Learning from Our Mistakes. Yes. So you can see that today we are on Ocean. Probably, I mean, I like Ocean. We talked about before, I don't really have that much of a problem with this map. Doesn't matter what sort of ship I'm in, I enjoy it. But for a lot of people, this probably isn't their favorite map. And it's probably, maybe something they'd just like to avoid altogether. But, you know, keep in mind, this is the most historical map that we have in World Warships at this time. Anyway, so learning from our mistakes, and we're in the Thotgor. So, I mean, my role here is going, as a destroyer, I figure that my role, you know, is going to be going out there, probably get into the center of the map here, start shooting torpedoes off at enemies, try and weaken them a little for my team, because my team ideally is going to be behind me, right where I'm a destroyer, I'll be out front, so ideally they'll be behind me and be able to finish off any enemies that maybe I don't get, or, you know, if I just hit an enemy with one torpedo or something like that, they would be able to come in and finish them off. That's the hope, and that's sort of generally accepted plan, you know, with destroyers and whatnot, and what they are supposed to do. Now, obviously as well, once I get out into the middle, I'll be doing some spotting as well, which is going to help my team. So this is all things that are going through my mind, just making sure that I, you know, keep it in check as I'm getting to the center. You can see I have two destroyers, two allied destroyers down there to the, well, they're on the west side sort of now. They're moving south, right? So I've got those guys there as well, and I was thinking, oh, well, that's pretty great actually, because if they can move down that, move down the west side towards the south, maybe circle in behind the enemy base, I can just, you know, go straight into the enemy base. We can all meet up, cap the base, and we could win. That seems pretty reasonable to me, I thought. I didn't see too many big issues with that. But anyway, we're going to try and keep this strategy in mind, see how it unfolds, right, and adapt to it, obviously. Now, keep in mind, where this is an episode of learning from our mistakes, obviously everything doesn't go according to plan. So we do see some enemies start popping up, right? We can see an enemy cruiser off in the distance. So okay, I might be able to get some torpedoes off on him. Pretty far away though, and it's a cruiser, so you know the cruiser's probably going to be taking some pretty big or pretty good evasive maneuvers as my allies are shooting in on him. So probably not going to be able to actually hit that guy, most likely. Now I am spotted, and I'm spotted obviously because of the planes that are overhead. There's a dive bomber squadron that is right on top of me right now. There we go, dive bomber squadron just landed its bombs on me. Did a bit of damage, but nothing too serious, right? I'm able to repair it right away. So we're just going to let those planes move off. I am no longer spotted, so that's great. And we'll start lining up torpedoes on an enemy out here, hoping that the enemies don't actually see the torpedoes until it's too late. And then, you know, obviously they torpedoes hit the enemy and takes them out. I'm only going to fire one spread at the enemy here at this point in time. Reason for it is I wasn't sure where the enemy destroyers were, and I would hate to have an enemy destroyer just pop up in front of me and not have any torpedoes available to fire at that enemy. With that in mind though, I didn't see any enemy destroyers, and we do have more enemy ships to line torpedoes up on, specifically enemy battleships, right? So we're going to launch these torpedoes off now, and we're just going to wait on the full reload for the torpedoes. While all of this is going on, you know, taking a look at the mini-map, and it does look like the majority of the enemy ships are over on the east side, working their way to the north. So, okay, alright. You can see we just pinged on the map some of our destroyers, right, hoping that those destroyers would get into the enemy base, or at least get closer to the enemy base, because frankly, right now, what they are doing is they are hunting for the aircraft carrier. And this is a big mistake. Don't hunt for the aircraft carrier as a destroyer, as, you know, your first thing that you're going to be doing in the map. Don't do that, because you're just taking yourself out of the battle until you either find the aircraft carrier and take it out, or until the enemies find you and kill you, right? Because if this early in the battle, the enemies are still going to be relatively close together, or at least they're going to be within firing range, able to support each other, right? So if you're back there taking out the enemy aircraft carrier, the enemy ships are going to not enjoy that, and they'll probably send one or two ships to deal with you, right? So those two destroyers down there, not necessarily the best tactic by those guys. Now, saving grace for those players, though, is that the enemy aircraft carrier isn't actually down there in the southwest. No, the enemy aircraft carrier is on the east side, right? Maybe southeast or south-southeast, somewhere around there, right? Is where the enemy aircraft carrier is. So, what that means is that the enemy my ally destroyers who are down there, yeah, it's not so bad, because now they are actually pushing towards the enemy base, which is good. You can see my ships, though, my team, on the mini-map, right, the way they're positioned, it doesn't look so great at this point in time versus the enemy's formation, right? The enemy has a really tight formation going on here to the north, whereas our ships are still kind of off in the back doing nothing. And in fact, I think we even have an AFK cruiser on our team, so so this isn't going to help us at all, right? So suddenly we're down a cruiser. We've already lost a cruiser as well, so things aren't looking so great even this early on in the battle. So that's sort of why I'm circling back and deciding, well, maybe I'm not going to go into the enemy base. Maybe I'm going to continue to harass these enemy ships as they get closer to my allies, right? So you can see the harassing maneuvers kind of work there. I did get one torpedo hit on that Iowa, so at least did a bit of damage there. We've got more torpedoes on the way for the Izumo as well, so that it's good. So if I can just sort of keep these enemies off at distance, take torpedo shots off at them, especially where they're so closely clustered together like this, hopefully I'm going to be able to do a bit of damage here and take some of these guys out. So torpedoes go in for the Izumo. I managed to get 2 torpedo hits on the Izumo. That's not too bad at all. And you can see right now is a great situation for more torpedoes to come in, because the enemies are kind of clustered together, freaking out a little, right? Enemy Izumo goes down. One of my allies took him out and finished him off, so fantastic. Good job there. In the meantime, though, we did lose another cruiser, so that, again, kind of sucks. And the 2 destroyers that we had down there in the south, remember we were counting on them to start moving into the enemy base and putting pressure on the enemy base. Well, they are actually down there in the south. One of them is just on the outskirts of the enemy base, so they're kind of working out down there, which isn't too bad. The biggest problem we're facing right now, though, is this enemy push up to the north. We still haven't been able to really blunt this push at all. You can see for the most part, most of these enemy ships are continuing just their drive to the north, right? And my ships, my allied ships who are at the base, it doesn't seem as though they're doing a whole lot, or at least they're not, in a good position to be able to defend this, to defend the base, right? So it's just not, just doesn't look very good right now. If we were to look at the mini map, right, it just seems as though things are going wrong. So my new plan, or I guess a continuation of the plan, is to continue to harass these enemies while they move up into our base. If I can get these enemies, some of these enemies gone, that might actually make a difference here for my allies and maybe help us out in defending this base. That is the hope. Allied destroyers down there in the south, they're doing it again. They're hunting down the enemy aircraft carrier, right? You can see that at this point in time, enemy cruisers know what's going on. They know where these destroyers are, so you can see they've got 2 enemy cruisers engaging our destroyers down there. So they're really just not doing a good job at this point in time, right? As soon as you go off, we just talked about it, right? As soon as you go off and hunt down the aircraft carrier right at the beginning of the battle, you've taken yourself out of the battle until the aircraft carrier is dealt with. And these early stages of the battle are pretty important, because you're establishing lines, right? Offensive lines, defensive lines, and hopefully as well the enemy would recognize that. Hopefully your lines would be strong enough, and the enemy would see that you have a pretty good defensive line that they're not going to be able to push through, and a pretty good offensive line, which the enemies need to react to. The benefit there is the enemy hopefully would then split their forces, right? Someone's going to have to go back and defend the base against your offense, and someone is going to have to keep putting pressure on the defense in hopes that they can break it and get into your base. That's not what's happening here, though. No. Up there at our base, we lost a battleship. So that battleship is gone, and that is fairly tragic, because we really needed the heavy guns of the battleships up there in our base. So right at this point in time, my allied team more or less has abandoned our base, right? There are 2 allied ships up there. One of the allied ships who is up there is another battleship, But you know, a single battleship all on its own, it's very easy to take down, especially considering the amount of enemy ships that we're looking at here. You know, they would easily be able to focus fire on that battleship and just take it down, and it's gone. So our base is fairly wide open at this point in time. And this is where I start making mistakes, because I start thinking, you know, should I go back to the base and play the defense on the base, or I'm so close to the enemy base, maybe I should circle in and do the job of those other two destroyers as they should have done from the beginning, go in there and start capping the enemy base. And I wasn't sure what to do. I was looking at the minimap, and yeah, there are two allied ships up there at the base. There's another allied ship to the south of the base. Looks like he's heading up maybe to support and provide defense. Okay, all right. One of our allied destroyers is gone. So taking that into an account, you can see I do have also an allied cruiser down here with me as well. So I do decide that I'm going to push into the enemy base. We're going to try and take the enemy base. The plan here is that if I start capping this base, maybe it would rattle the enemy enough that they would stop their advance in our base and come down and do something about theirs, about their base, right? That's my plan, but this was a mistake. I am confident that I should have went up and did the defense on our base, right? Because at the very least, if I would have provided the defense to our base, maybe we could have taken out a few more enemy ships, closed the point gap, and then eventually come down and cap out the enemy base. Maybe. Anyway, 2 torpedoes hit the McCall, managed to take out that guy, so that's not too bad at all. And we're taking a look at the other ships we have around here. We've got 2 New Orleans, we see them over there. One's on fairly low health. And we have the enemy aircraft carrier. We can finally spot the enemy aircraft carrier. This guy was not a stupid player, right? He moved up with his team, and he's not even down here in the south anymore. So the whole advance and the whole push by my allied destroyers to try and take out the enemy carrier, completely useless. And this is why you really shouldn't take out the enemy or try to hunt down the enemy aircraft carrier in a destroyer right at the beginning of the battle. It's just, you're just taking yourself out of the battle. Now, I mean, it's a completely different thing for one of our friendly aircraft carriers to take out an enemy aircraft carrier right at the beginning, right? That's totally different. But for a destroyer to do it right at the beginning, especially for 2 destroyers to do it right at the beginning, no, not great. So we launched torpedoes off of that 1 New Orleans, right? He's on fairly low health, and hopefully I'm going to be able to hit this guy and take him out. We are capping the enemy base, but the enemies are now capping our base, right? And if we do take a look at the minimap, we can see that there's only a few allied ships, maybe 1 allied ship up there at our base to actually provide any sort of defense. Torpedoes are on the way for the Lexington, so the first 2 miss, but the second 2 go in and do a bit of damage there. So I do manage to get 2 torpedo hits on the Lexington, and in the meantime, the torpedoes I launched at one of the New Orleans did hit that New Orleans and took him out as well. So fantastic. One of the enemy cruisers is now gone. But we are not out of the woods as of yet. No. You can see my maneuvers to launch torpedoes off at the aircraft carrier as well to avoid incoming fire from the New Orleans has resulted in me leaving the enemy base, so that kind of sucked as well, and that was a pretty big mistake because now we're trailing in the capping, so that's not great. The enemies, meantime, they do have 2 enemy ships in our cap, so they are capping it faster than what I can do, and I still have to face off against the enemy aircraft carrier, which I've got more torpedoes on the way for, but those torpedoes are going to miss entirely, and the enemy New Orleans. It's at this point in time, too, that the enemy aircraft carrier, I mean, this player was not a bad player whatsoever. I mean, the enemy aircraft carrier has dive bombers right overhead of me. You can see them. That's why I'm spotted as well. And in addition to this, the enemy aircraft carrier kept a fighter squadron over me as well at all times, just to keep me spotted so that the enemy New Orleans could continue to fire at me and eventually take me out as well. So kind of sucked. So I mean, at one point in time, I don't think it's happening as of yet, but I do get fairly frustrated with this, right? Because nothing makes a destroyer captain more angry than having an aircraft carrier captain who's actually competent and who is keeping fighters over destroyers to keep them spotted. Nothing makes a destroyer captain more angry, at least for me anyway. So I mean, I've got my AA turned on, and I'm shooting at these planes. I'm actually taking out a few of them, which was a little surprising. So the enemy torpedo bombers came in, and they completely missed. Now we are gonna. Now my guns are firing at the enemy fighters, who are still overhead, still keeping me spotted. and I still have this enemy New Orleans over here, right? We can see him. My torpedoes are not reloaded as of yet. In fact, down there on the little damage screen, I just lost one of my torpedo launchers that had to repair. And you know what that means? It means that torpedo launcher is going to be subject to a full reload. So that sucks. That's not so great. So we're still cruising around, still hoping and praying that somehow we might be able to win this, but it's really not going to happen, right? I mean, up there at our base, the enemies are all in there. They're all capping it out now. And that enemy push just destroyed the meager defense that my team was putting up. Just gone. I mean, there's only myself and my aircraft carrier remaining. That's it. So the aircraft carrier is trying to do whatever damage he can to, or rather the player can, to reset our base and reset their caps. Give me a bit of time here, but it's all for naught, right? This is just way too late to be mounting any sort of resistance at this point in time. And it all comes back to just the mistakes that were made early on, right? The two destroyers just splitting off and going off to the south of the map and eventually dying and accomplishing nothing down there, right? You can see them on the list here. I mean, neither one of them managed to get any sort of kill, so completely useless. In addition to that, the defense that we sort of mounted at our base wasn't really that great. The team wasn't coordinated with it. On my end, my mistake obviously was continuing to push into the enemy base when I could clearly see that our defense at our base was not going to hold. It just wasn't. But I decided to continue along into the enemy base, which was my mistake, right? I shouldn't necessarily done it, or did it rather, and I just got caught up, I guess you could say, in trying to get this enemy base captured, right? Figuring and hoping that my team would do something to prevent the capture of our base, but doesn't actually happen. We've got this one last New Orleans over here, and I never actually do manage to take him out. Luckily for me, though, this New Orleans doesn't actually manage to take me out, so you know, pretty good. I did manage to dodge and avoid a few of these shots and get lucky with some of them as well, obviously. So I mean, he continues to do damage to me, and I continue to take damage, but not killed. And there we go. Battle is over. This made me angry because it's. I mean, you saw the mistakes that were made, right? I mean, I'm included in there, right? By no means is this the team's failure and I was just the one trying to hold it together. No, I made mistakes as well. But it's just so frustrating when you see this, right? Some of my mistakes I think I could have corrected and it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But the biggest thing there was just the defense of our base. It wasn't coordinated whatsoever. Anyway, battle is over. You saw the results there, so it wasn't too bad. I mean, I still did a bunch of damage, right? Not too shabby at all. We come back to the port, and in fact, you can see I was so frustrated I decided to jump into the Thotgor once again. Yes. Anyway, that's a battle for another time. That is today's video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have for me, as always, in the video comments section below. Love reading those and responding back to them. Hit the old like button if you did like today's video. Hit subscribe if you are not a subscriber. And as always, I do hope you enjoy the rest of your day.